You ever had one of those mornings where the sky's clear, the air's still, and you figure you'll just knock out some chores before lunch? That was just me, my old green tractor, and a field that hadn't been trimmed since spring. Nothing complicated, nothing dramatic. But I should have known better. Because in our little neighborhood, peace never lasts long when Helen Mackey's got a clipboard and a grudge. Helen's the HOA president, self-appointed queen of the cul-de-sac, and the kind of woman who treats a misplaced recycling bin like a federal crime. Now me, I live just outside the HOA boundary. 46 feet, to be exact. Marked it with flags. Surveyed it twice. Made sure I wouldn't owe her a single ounce of courtesy or control. And still she came. In a pink robe, no less. Barefoot, waving a hairbrush like it was a damn sword, hollering about unauthorized mechanical disturbances as if my tractor was some outlaw engine of chaos. I killed the motor, pulled off my ear protection, and all I could do was blink at her like, "Lady, what in God's name is happening right now?" She points at me and yells, "You're violating neighborhood harmony statutes. Shut it down immediately, or I'll have you removed." Mind you, she's standing ankle-deep in my muddy ditch, hair going 50 directions, yelling into a megaphone that made her sound like a goose caught in a blender. I just said, calm as I could, "Helen, you're on my land." But Helen didn't come for a geography lesson. She came for a showdown. She whipped out her phone, dialed the sheriff, and started rattling off complaints like she had the entire penal code memorized. Now here's where it gets good. What she didn't know what made this whole thing so delicious is that I trained the sheriff's department. Tactical operations. Off-road recovery. You name it. Matter of fact, just last week, I was running drills with Unit 3 right here on this property using that exact tractor. So I leaned back in the seat, crossed my arms, and waited. Not a word. Just a little smirk and a sip of coffee. 15 minutes later, cruiser pulls up. Out steps Deputy Collins' kid I taught myself, back when he could barely load a tow winch without tripping over his own boots. He sees me, nods real casual, like, "Morning, sir." Then he sees Helen, who's now poking my front tire with a clipboard and demanding my engine be impounded immediately for auditory assault. I swear, I almost spit out my coffee. Collins keeps a straight face for about 10 seconds before he goes, "You mowing again, Mr. Langston?" I nod. He nods back. Meanwhile, Helen's jaw hits the gravel like she just realized Santa Claus doesn't work for the FBI. She turns on Collins, furious, sputtering legalese that sounds like it was stolen from a soap opera. But he just shrugs and says, "Ma'am, this land is outside HOA jurisdiction. And frankly, this man taught me everything I know about perimeter law enforcement." You could have heard a squirrel sneeze after that. Helen didn't take it well. She stormed off, mumbling threats about going over his head and bringing real consequences. And that should have been the end of it. But you know people like her, they don't retreat, they reload. 2 days later, black SUV starts parking across the street. Not in my driveway. Not long enough to be obvious. Just watching. Every few hours. One morning, I catch a guy inside snapping photos with a zoom lens aimed square at my barn. I walk up, knock on his window, ask if he's bird watching or just lost. He stammers, says he's conducting property research. I ask, "You in law enforcement?" He says no. "Private investigator?" He pauses. That's when I know. I say, "Helen send you?" He doesn't answer. Just peels out like he's got something worth hiding. Now that lit a little fire in me. So I called up the sheriff's department and invited Unit 3 back out for a refresher field drill. We set up cones, gates, dummy recoveries, the works. That tractor was front and center. Next thing I know, 7 cruisers are lined up in my field like we're staging for a parade. Helen sees it from across the road and runs out yelling again, this time in a suit jacket that looked like it was borrowed from her husband's funeral wardrobe. Deputy Monroe tells her politely, "Ma'am, this is official sheriff business. Best to head on back inside." But Helen? She doesn't back down. She schedules an emergency HOA meeting and prints up glossy flyers calling me an agricultural menace. I showed up to that meeting fashionably latte on the tractor, pulled right into the community center parking lot. She was mid-speech when I walked in. Her PowerPoint slide said, "Danger on wheels. How one man is destroying neighborhood peace." I sat next to Collins, who handed me a bottle of water like we were at a basketball game. The whole room was tense. Helen starts rolling through slides, satellite images of my property, graphs about soil erosion, and one hilarious photo of my tractor with devil horns photoshopped on. But then she makes her big mistake, flashes a drone photo of my barn. The barn with official sheriff equipment. I stand up, say loud enough for everyone to hear, "Ma'am, that's a registered tactical training site. You've just shown unauthorized surveillance of law enforcement property to a public audience." You could feel the oxygen leave the room. Colin stands up, flashes his badge, confirms everything. "Helen?" She freezes. Then she panics. Accidentally clicks through 5 more slides, including one that just says "Tractor Tyranny" in Comic Sans. The meeting falls apart. Board members start whispering. One even asks if she's mentally fit to lead. She storms off the stage without a word. But she ain't done up by a mile. Next thing I know, I'm being served. County-level complaint. Full lawsuit. Claims I'm running a militia, falsifying land status, colluding with cops. My lawyer laughs so hard, she almost drops her phone. But we don't just defend. We counter. With everything. Drone footage. PI admissions. HOA misappropriations. Turns out Jim from the board had dug up expense reports showing Helen spent HOA funds on God knows what. Lawn surveillance cameras. Legal consultations. Even $400 on color ink for flyers. The court date hits like a finale. Packed room. Judge with no patience for drama. Helen starts reading some deranged statement about defending residential purity. My lawyer calmly presents every single piece of evidence. Slide by slide. Dollar by dollar. And when those financial records hit, that courtroom turned. The board distanced themselves. One stood up and said they'd been silenced. The judge dismissed her case with a line I'll never forget: "This courtroom does not exist to entertain personal vendettas." Then she called for a formal inquiry into HOA fund abuse. Helen didn't cry. She didn't yell. She just sat down like someone had unplugged her battery. Outside, reporters were waiting. I kept my mouth shut. Let my lawyer handle it. But deep down, I knew it was over. Not just for the case but for her. Days later, Helen was voted out unanimously. Mr. Morales took over as president. Cleaned house. Audits were put in place. Sheriff's Department opened a full investigation into the finances. And that was that. The storm passed. Then came the harvest parade. They asked me to lead it. My tractor, polished to a shine, flying an American flag, trailed by the sheriff's unit. Kids painted signs that said, "Keep calm and trust the tractor." Someone even dressed a goat in a sash that read, "HOA Survivor." I looked up once and saw Helen peeking through the blinds. No clipboard. No megaphone. Just watching. The cookout after was something else. Pie-eating contests, lemonade, handshakes, thank yous. Folks I hadn't talked to in years stopped by to say they were glad someone finally stood up. One kid even asked if he could be a tractor sheriff someday. I told him, only if you learn how to reverse this thing on a hill. That night, Morales handed me a letter-formal apology from the board, promise of transparency, and a gift card to the hardware store with a note that read, "Hope this covers your next set of tires." And as I sat on my porch later, watching the stars, listening to the crickets, I thought about everything. All the nonsense. The yelling. The legal threats. The TikToks. And I realized it was never about the tractor. It was about control. About someone thinking they could shout their way to power. And how sometimes, the quiet ones, the ones just doing their work, mowing their fields, the ones who end up bringing the whole thing down by simply refusing to back off. So yeah, the tractor's still here. Still rolling. Still stubborn. And so am I. If you've ever dealt with someone like Helen, someone who lets power go to their head, drop your story down below. I want to hear it. Or if you think I went too far, say that too. Let's talk. Let's get real. Because sometimes, justice doesn't wear a robe, it rides a John Deere.